So as the organizer asked me to move away or expand my research on not just focusing on the exhibition, so my presentation is going to be a little bit um, more complex. Hopefully, it works and I can keep the time. So, just very quickly about Burgenland. This is a county in between Austria and Hungary, as you could see. And basically, it was formed and established after the First World War. It has many disputes how the border can be formulated. You could see on your left-hand side, the black and white maps that shows the different borders that go through this area. And there were numerous disputes what territory should be on the Hungarian side and what should be on the Austrian side. It was basically a rather agricultural area, and it is still today. At its establishment, there was only two cities, and the other settlements were much smaller, and it was a highly multicultural, multi-ethnic society who lived here. The next huge phase in the history of Burgenland is or was the Cold War period. As you could see in the middle, actually the Iron Curtain goes through at the border of Burgenland. So even though Austria reached independence in the 50s, still the presence of the Iron Curtain highly influenced the area. Of course, there were two important moments, and I'm going to talk about it later. One is 1956, when there was a Hungarian revolution you might have all heard about, and then thousands of Hungarians escaped from the Eastern Bloc to Austria through this area. And also the other big moment, so to say, is 1989, when again, the Iron Curtain opened for a day, and hundreds of people left to Austria in order, mainly German-speaking communities and people, to reach the western side of then Europe. Life got unquestionably easier after 1989, and since then there are plenty of intercultural transnational cooperations in the between Austria, Hungary, and Slovakia, just to name a few. And it is and Burgenland reaches a much more beautiful and charming representation than being next to the Iron Curtain. But of course, it was not an easy process. As early as in the 1990s, it was named as the poorest and least developed county of Austria. And so it has to have a huge transformation from being next to the border, being very agricultural in terms of uneducated, uncultural area. And now it's changing much more. They celebrated the 100 years anniversary of the county in 2019, and that was the so to say apropos or reason why I looked at this area and how the whole 100 years history is memorized. What are the points that are memorized and how it is memorized throughout this year and later. So of course, as we all know, memorials are very important aspects of the memory work. There are numerous monuments like the one you could see on the image about First World War, Second World War, or even big epidemics that happened earlier. Usually there are names on these memorials. So how we can see that as a terms of memory work? We can say it, and of course I understand these are very simplified understandings of the different approaches we are dealing with in the last 2.5 days. But I'm going to just would like to show with this that there are different ways and approaches how we can understand these memory works. Of course, it's it's antagonistic in a way because just the victims are enumerated. We can say it's cosmopolitan because especially the first and second World War memorials are very generalized. It's an international trend how they are represented. If we just think about the different uniforms of the soldiers that can be seen on these monuments, you can easily identify which period of the memorials are commemorating. But in this case, especially, we can see it as a kind of, it can be understood or approached or work as in an agonistic way if we look at the, for example, the different names and how the diachrons of the names are used or not used. Because the First World War, uh, you could in the names you could clearly see Hungarian names with the diachrons, Croatian names, German names, and then as time goes by, these names changed, especially the first names, the diachrons left out, and then the same name became Germanized in a way, or Austrian versions of the same name appeared. So by identifying these transformations of using the name, and we have heard about the importance of naming and their changes, you could easily look at and ask questions about either transportation of the population from outside as a force or a kind of assimilation process. So it is a tool that can be used maybe in a more agonistic way, but simply the fact that these are memorials, of course, it doesn't trigger in themselves any questions or discussions. We did spoke about this multi-ethnic society that still appears, even though based on the censuses, more and more people identify themselves as Austrians or German speaking. Even the language use are fading away from the societies. But if you look around, you do see these different signs or that shows the coexistence, the long-time coexistence of the different communities. You do see texts in 2 languages or 3 languages, and they are sometimes not parallel translations of each other. In this way, the use of the different languages are showing different functions, and also you could assume that the target audience knows both languages, so it has a kind of kept multi-ethnic society. Of course, there are communities whose representation is missing, and this is the Jewish communities and the Roma communities. We have already heard about the forgotten Jewish community and the memory of a multicultural past. We could only see a handful of this otherwise very vivid Jewish community in here. I'm talking about this whole issue, more details in my text, and I'm happy to answer any questions regarding this issue if you have in the discussions. And last but not least, very interestingly, there is a huge push to show or compensate almost this formerly an agricultural representation of the county to a more cultural one by pushing and emphasizing former I meaning pre-Burgenland state existence or functions or operations of great internationally renowned musicians, maybe like Joseph Haydn, who used to work here for a short period of time, or Liszt, or you can also name Franz Lehard, whose presence as an image of the location is emphasized. So in this way, you can say it can be agonistic representation of the multi-ethnic society if these names and texts are made and chosen, in a participatory action. But if you see this overestimation of this super nice, undisputed, a political past of very cultural area and borderless inclusions of Liszt, who are unquestionably favored Hungarians, and don't speak about the fact that he didn't speak any Hungarian. So not problematizing the issue.
We've just lost
might
the sound.
seem to closer rather to a cosmopolitan approach, but more research should have been done in this regard. And so about the Iron Curtain, even though, as I said, Austria achieved independence, they lived next to, or at least in Burgenland, Iron Curtain was there. And so this existence unquestionably influenced the past. And it was approximately, let's say, 40 years, more or less. So it is among the 100 years, it is a very important, or at least significant amount of time. And how it is appeared or memorized in any way, I'm just showing you 3 examples. On your very left-hand side, this nice sign, there are a few handful of examples of watchtowers still existing and used as a memorial. And you could see it on the way of these different information panels that are mainly for tourists or local visitors to show you can also go and see a watchtower still existing. Then in the middle, you see the example that is in Blyden, which is rather the southern part of Burgenland. Here they established by scholars and EU funds a route, and it's called the border experience route that has many stops, as you could see, and there are installations, very few authentic objects, and the whole aim seemingly that you experience this border existence. Sometimes this project, even though it's very inclusive and you could experience and there are interactive elements, still some of the experience are more for the experience and fun, much rather than the cruelty of this past that is shown and experienced. We can also discuss how do you memorize, or what part is memorized, and do you really have or formulate questions if you have these nice meditation steps, and there is also a playground involved in this tour. There are, as I said, the 2 historic moments, 56 and 89. 56, there is this bridge. You could see it was torn apart in the black and white image on the top. That's from Andau. It is memorized on the Austrian side. This is the bridge that was open in 1956 and people could come over here. It's very interesting that it's only on the Austrian side commemorized. You can even enter this area from the Hungarian side. It's still border area. So it is a very international and Austrian commemorations. It is a little bit sanctified, if I can say, by these statues and very dramatic wooden representations. I am not sure how much question would you raise if you go and experience it. Based on my experience and research on site, there were not too many discussions, much rather commemoration in a way. On the other hand, this opening of the Iron Curtain in 1989, you have the celebration on the Hungarian side as it happened there. It's a Génius Lóczy location. But here you also have a lot of memorials retrospectively open, but it is much more like a huge battlefield. Like it's nothing, it's just a meadow with these very enormous memorials and some information plaques that are there, which is not really, which is like a belated commemoration. I have some questions. How much is it be able to categorize? We can say it's not really antagonistic because the victim perpetrator roles are not defined, and none of them are the local Burgenlanders, that's for sure, because they are only so to say the helpers who accept those who are leaving the area from Hungary. It is cosmopolitan because, especially the 1989 memorial became a European heritage labeled site. So it's a memory site that is in the whole European heritage cosmopolitan view. So it is really decontextualized in a way, not really focusing on the actual events, but in the big narrative of opening up the Iron Curtain. And it would be agonistic if it's a critical, self-reflexive, and multivocal narration that is challenging the existing narrative, as we all know. Um, Unless you have a guide who at both locations or both three locations that helps you formulate these questions, then you would not you would not raise these questions by looking only the exhibited objects. And the problem with all the three of them, that there are no on-site guides or apps or anything that would raise these questions that has to be raised for an agonistic approach. There were two huge exhibitions for the memorial of the 100 years existence, and one of them was in Schleining, that was the central exhibition, and the other one in Güssing was a private exhibition. I would say that the the central one focuses on the present, and it also shows the plurality of the community. So it's like the famous European Union slogan of diversity in unity, or unity in diversity. That's what you can get as a message. There are only two emotional spots in the history or in the whole exhibition, which is more like thematic rather than chronological. And this is the Holocaust and in the 1990s, the attacks on minorities. And they are shown as a handful examples that are not really related to the local history, doesn't have past that leads to these actions or any further consequences shows on the exhibition. So it is really minimalized. Although, because that was the central exhibition, there were other activities, books, as you could see on the image, and talks and events, which might have triggered questions and answers, but they were all and exclusively in German, while the exhibition was bilingual. On the private exhibition shows a more diachronic story, where there were the local community that was multicultural, but a constant community, and everything that happened with us, so to say, in the last 100 years are from outside great powers. So it is us and them in a way. And also, it used much more classical museum objects, as you could see. And although it has some interactivity and modern technologies and also oral history, private stories besides the grand narrative, it has a much less possibility of these questions and disputes that the other offers through the publications and the events. So as you could see, these are the diverse things which I try to put in opposition or comparison to the two exhibitions. What are the common things are that none of them really expelled or discusses inner conflicts, and both of them speaks about the grand narrative and identical personal stories. I would say that the central exhibition is in a way agonistic or cosmopolitan because of this general unity in diversity notion, while by the individual exhibition has this us and them contradiction, and also agonistic in a way if we see some of the intentions that were there. Of course, I'm sorry. of course, it depends. One of them is a central exhibition, a lot of money, while the other one is a private initiative. So you have to take into consideration these, so to say, outside effort as well. So in conclusion, as you could see on the left-hand side, wine and nature and multiculturality and also this very noble cultural past are emphasized. What is missing is the central role, which is the the Roma and the Jewish communities past, and also the Iron Curtain past. And some of the moments are commemorated. This is 56 and 98. But you have to take into consideration that both events were not really happened in Borgenland. They were just, so to say, the receiving community. So the whole dispute of what are the roles of the locals in these discussions are not the classical victim and perpetrator contradiction. So I would say that based on these evaluation of the different memory actions, one have to keep in mind that that the receiver's point of view might be different. If I am a member of any of the community, ethnic community of Burgenland, I might understand the different representation from an emotional point of view. I might have different amount of information about it. So I do realize cosmopolitan or agonistic differentiation more easily. The medium is unquestionably influenced the approach, because a memorial per se by itself cannot have such interaction than, let's say, a museum targeting different questions. Also, the time of the memorization is very important. Yet again, the memorials were made before Burgenland was existed. The 100 years anniversary is for celebration, not for commemoration. So even the title or the aim or the time of this memorization influences how we approach the past. And also it is very important that the time distance is important. So it is much easier to speak about the past without emotions if there are no personal experience or these past events are far away from the receiver or even the representer. And of course, the goal of the memorization, as I said before, can be an influencing factor. So in a very, very nutshell, and hoping to keep the 20 minutes, that's all what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Here we go. Thank you. Thank you. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce two colleagues from our project here, two colleagues and friends, I should say. So I'm going to probably mispronounce your names. I have been practicing. So Rosanna Tsaturian and Joanna Vavjaniak. I've been practicing. And who are going to be presenting a comparative paper on, they changed their title, War Situations of Museums in Armenia and Poland. So over to you, 20 minutes.
Thank you so much, Nina. Yes, so as Nina has already said, we've changed slightly the title, which would now kind of represent or grasps better what we have in the paper. And I should say that our presentation is full of text. It shouldn't be like that, but you know, I'm kind of suffering from the sleep deprivation, and I just wanted to have it set somewhere, as Sofia said, so at least it will be on the slides. And we have kind of the lots of information with Rosanna to convey, so we just do it in a bullet points, okay? So that's an introduction of our talk. First we'll try to explain what do we mean by curating mnemonic security, then we have two case studies from Poland and Armenia, and finally we'll come to some conclusions. So kind of the starting point of our talk, and that's what we did, is, that's what most of you who are somehow in the museum and memory studies, of course, know, that in the 19th and 20th century, historical ethnographic museums were among key institutions to uphold imagined communities and disseminate the state-centric culture, memory. They were orientalizing others and presenting antagonistic representation of the past. However, in the last decade, some of those museums have become more open toward cosmopolitanism, multi-perspectivity, and alternative museum practices. This has been a result of, many trends, but among them the development of new trends in critical museology, decolonization waves, and European policies of memory. In effect, in many contemporary institutions, there is an ongoing conflict between the construction of meanings that support well-known patterns of authorized cultural memory and the ambition to act as places of pluralism and inclusion. And what is interesting for us in the moment where we are at right now is that this ongoing conflict is now being reinforced by new wars that have a return impact on cultural memories. And this is the moment which we try to grasp. So what we do in our paper, we explore current alternation of cultural memories, looking at the museums in two countries differently affected by ongoing conflicts. They're both, and I think that's quite important, both placed in the region where museums work with war refugees has only begun in recent years, but given the instability of political situation will likely continue in future. And we have these two case studies from Armenia and Poland, and I skip the historical details, the political details, because you all know them very well. And a few theoretical concepts we use in our paper. So first one is the overlapping periphery, like scholars working in the world system theory, kind of conceptualized as territories located in the zones of historical convergence between different political and cultural powers. The formation of identities and memories are byproducts of overlapping influences rather than of concentrated centers. However, within the overlapping peripheries, there are these practices of mnemonic security, where state and other actors engage themselves in permanent process of creating and recreating a narrative about its origins, its coming into being within its own borders. This way it guarantees it, and to quote Maria Malkso, who is an author of that concept, cohesiveness in order to reduce the fundamental unpredictability of the surrounding environment and its own vulnerability vis-à-vis other political actors. And those discursive processes particularly involve how the histories of disputed territories are being narrated and represented. The disputed territories are often important elements of this overall narrative framework of mnemonic security. And so what we kind of try to transfer those into the museum practice, and then we have the concept of curatorial memory practices, which mean the ways the past is being addressed, constructed, and reframed in the museums. And what the curating mnemonic security would mean is addressing, constructing, and reframing the past in a way that it reduces the unpredictability of the surrounding environment. And then we have like several thoughts about similarities and differences between Armenia and Poland and the museum context in Armenia and Poland. So they are both involve the cultural legacies of overlapping territories, and this mnemonic security is developed by the use of representation of long historical roots, tradition of pre-modern statehood, innocent victimhood, military activities, and religion. You can see or recognize the room with the maps in the Armenian history museum, and the map serves, like, there are maps from several historical periods which kind of represent the right to space of Armenian. Of course, similar is also the effect of the Russian imperial legacies in both countries, but also the Soviet legacies in both countries. There are also important differences, which are the effect of the EU accession in Poland, and I'm just going to skip it for now. So the key questions of our paper is: how do museums in Armenia react to the war in Nagorno-Karabakh? How do museums in Poland react to the war in Ukraine? What are the main curatorial mnemonic practices? What are the pathways to mnemonic security? What modes of remembrance do they involve? Our data was the desk research of online resources, observation of ongoing processes and evolving museum discourses, site visit, interviews. And very briefly on the Polish case. So, as you all of you know, there are like many contested legacies between the Poland and Ukraine. Western Ukraine is a space of both shared and contested histories among Ukrainians, Jews, Poles, and others. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth and the Polish interwar republic colonization of Ukraine is one of the key issues. Nostalgic discourse of Kresy, mentioned by Krzysztof a few days ago, and the mutual ethnic violence, including ethnic cleansing of Poles by Ukrainians in Volhynia. And there were like important social and cultural challenges before the war. Ukrainians as guest workers without really the lack of cultural offer for them. The unreflective use of terminology of those Kresy thing, but also this dispute now, should we speak na Ukrainie or w Ukrainie, which is being changed. And then the narrative of public history, which used to be more like marginalizing, downgrading, orientalizing, or othering Ukrainians and non-problematizing the common history. And what are the war challenges and responses? So there is this influx of refugees, mainly women with children in 2022, security issues, with that feeling that by supporting Ukraine, we basically support ourselves. And unusual civil society mobilization, museums and their staff are part of that process. And official data speaks of involvement of over 150 museums in 2022, but there were more. And this is the very official. And these are just, some examples of what museums actually did. So like temporary exhibitions by Ukrainian artists, residencies for Ukrainians, hosting Ukrainians in museum premises, hiring Ukrainians, heritage practitioners, text and audio guides in Ukrainian, and so on and so on. And now I just want to, because I have probably 3 more minutes of my own time, I just want to concentrate briefly on the museum you all know, and you can see some of the members of our project on the slides, or the Polin Museum of Polish Jews as a case study of something which we can actually call a pathway to agonism under the war situation. So what is interesting that many of the events represented at the exhibition in the Polin Museum of the Polish Jews happens actually at the territory of today, Ukraine. The main object of this exhibition, the wooden synagogue, is from a place which is based, it is in Ukraine. And what happened in the museum during the war was the invitation to a critical reading of the exhibition by Ukrainian researchers who were hosted as war refugees in the museum. So what they said, and this is, I'm just not going to read it all, I'm just read one quote from Mikhailo Zuber, who is a deputy director of the National Museum of Taras Shevchenko in Kyiv, but was also working as a fellow at the Polin Museum. So what he says, one gets the impression that Polish colonization covered empty lands. This perspective makes it difficult to determine the full scope of relationship between Jews, Poles, and Ukrainians, and can lead to a somewhat incomplete and sometimes distorted narrative. This type of approach means that visitors from Ukraine cannot perceive this history personally as their own, and Ukrainians cannot fully perceive as its participants. And they gave but the museum board actually commissioned a full report from them, and they are trying now to somehow to tackle those issues on the exhibition. And then the other fellow who is also the Alla Marchenko, who is also a Memory Scholars at Risk Fellow, Memory Studies Association Scholar at Risk Fellow, and she was associated to Polin, was also working on a critical reading of that exhibition, but also doing the various workshop and walking tours with Ukrainians on the exhibitions. And in the report which she has wrote on that experience for the Memory Studies Association, she just frames several important hints. What is going on between the visitors, which were mainly Ukrainian visitors. Some of them were Ukrainian Jews who were in Poland, some were just Ukrainians, some of them were Russian-speaking Ukrainians, some were just Poles who joined those tours because they wanted to learn Ukrainians, what that experience meant to them. And what is interesting that there was also like a different, direction of this agonistic experience, because she said that was the moment when many Ukrainians learned about the Jewish experience in Ukraine, including the difficult moments like the pogroms of Jews by Ukrainians. And then she phrased like several methodological tips how to work with refugees, like connections between the audience and the museums. And for her, it was like she did it by connecting the Hasidic places which were on the map with the places which are now named in Ukrainian and which are in Ukraine, so that the visitors could somehow connect that to the places which are now there. Incorporating topics into tools focused on Jewish history and making them significant, relevant, accessible for the people who visited the exhibition, by somehow also a little bit linking to their own experience today. But she also was very careful about not re-traumatize the war's refugees. So, for instance, she very delicately tackled the Holocaust and also the war damages to Warsaw. So she more concentrates on resilience and proactive choices, trying to make from Warsaw a place that is an example of restoration from wartime ruin symbol and not just a symbol of death. So I'm sorry, I just have to very quickly give the mic to Rosanna, but that was the Polish point. 8 minutes. Thank you.
And yes, going to Armenian cases, we have followed different moments of escalation and the situations where museums, which serve as triggers for museums to reflect on the situation, that military attacks like blockade and recent development. And those were the really very important moments, because usually Armenian museums do not that much have to make their opinion public and make some statement very often, but these moments of escalation serve as a really triggers for them also to take their space and their role to speak over the situation. Here I will present I look at the data and information from 4 museums which we see as more representative for our cases, like History Museum of Armenia, Armenian Genocide Museum Institute, Armenian Ethnography Museum, and Mate Nadaran Institute for Ancient Manuscripts. We were trying to collect all the possible initiative and support practices during this time of escalation. Just I put the first place policy regulation, free entrance for displaced Artsakh citizen, and only Mate Nadaran mentioned just to have that possibility to speak when this time 2020 was wartime and COVID time. And the other museums, maybe some of them were closed, or some of them were already have free public entrance, and only for one museum it was issued to offer additional free admission for the kids. It doesn't mean that other museums refusing. For example, Genocide Museum, they always have free entrance for public. And they organize exhibitions, permanent or temporary, mostly temporary, because it's usually they can be more flexible in terms of resources and time, rather than change in that crisis situation, the permanent exhibition. They were trying to create digital content for better description of the situation and explanation of historical context, like seeing their role in transferring the deeper knowledge and proper argumentation to the audience who will reach them. Like initiating new researches on the topic, like Genocide Museum, they established a research group for research of Armenian heritage and issues of Nakhichevan, former Azerbaijani Armenian settlements in Azerbaijan, and organizing or participating in the conference, like museums see their roles in that momentum of crises to speak over that in different platforms. They were trying to publish books, articles on roots of conflict and Artsakh cultural heritage. There were even initiatives to documenting the war as it was going, like collecting the memory items from the soldiers already lost or from their families to keep that memories at the museum. They were like most of the support practices, like they were making or sharing statements of supports or some calls to refer to the situation. There were some also educational programs for displaced people, mostly for Artsakh kids. They were creating platforms for project matter discussion, like inviting someone to come and speak. I just want to share one very interesting example. It was an announcement that History Museum is organizing a meeting with war participant soldier, and when you read that, you will expect that someone will come and share how they were brave and fight and this kind of thing, but later it means that those soldiers, while having to be protected at the war, they constructed their defensive structures in a traditional Armenian way of roof system. And History Museum appreciated that way of their behavior and inviting them to share how like traditional culture could serve as a mean of resilience and resistance. Then museums have to address all these escalation moments in their public commemoration events, like linking all the time each holiday and public event to what is going on. For example, on March 8th, we have Women's Day celebration in Armenia, and they have invited like women soldiers who have participated in 3 Karabakh war to like share their experience of how it is to be a woman in Armenia and at the same time to participate in 3 wars, like trying to connect all the time the situation and the event together to be more meaningful. And also there were also initiatives designed from the up, like by the Ministry of Culture, Education, Science and Sport, we are all standby soldiers, asking museums to organize exhibition and sell some souvenir and then transfer that income to the fund for soldiers' relief and recovery. And practically, museum staff members were caring for soldiers and refugees because most of their family members were at war. And women were, you will see women, those are museum workers. They were sewing warm socks and hats because all of them were have someone at the front line. And also, museum staff members themselves were at the front line. It would be too naive and too romantic to expect that museums in that situation could stand ahead of the situation and trying to take their role as it is described in the in different theories and approaches, and they should stand in accordance with public feelings and public social structure and texture in times of crisis in order to perceive their role and to keep their role of not to be marginalized spaces, but one as society itself viewing themselves in a coherent way. So some exhibitions which might be of interest and a few practical what happened. They were online exhibitions like Fragments of Identity, temporary exhibition, in titles you can guess the content. Struggle and Culture, Artsakh Manuscript, and 35 years of Karabakh movement. So, and what were the main topics for curatorial approaches and modes of practices? They were mostly trying to link all the things happening now during, due to Azerbaijani new waves of aggression. They were trying to link it with Armenian genocide 1915, and also trying to make links with continuous waves of forced displacement of Armenians by Azerbaijan, and also trying to address the risks of loss of cultural heritage of Artsakh, like addressing the attempts of misinterpretation, damage, appropriation, and acts of vandalism. And here I would like just share one case and example of virtual exhibition, Treasures of Artsakh. You can later follow on by the link. It is online exhibition, free access exhibition, and 16 museums, Diaspora Museum and also Armenian Museum, work together to put this exhibition happen in order like to take care of Artsakh heritage and to take that responsibility to show it. And the meaning it is online, it means that that heritage is already uprooted. It has no home, and it means it's now everyone's. We can get more easily access and to have our own feelings and our own perceptions over it. This is one of the artifacts, like I will skip it. And yes, as this was a conference on agonism, all of us have to think over it. And this was a very good exercise for me and Joanna as well, because that dialogue in between us, we see as agonism, agonistic practice, yes. Because in different ways, we need to think over terms we are using and get that agreement over that process. And also beyond that, we see that joint collaboration, also some modern practice for agonistic perception, because this exchange of knowledge and experience. What is now emerging trend will be for Armenia. It already happened in Poland, like working with huge number of refugees, having them invited to museums, and this collaborative work in practical term. I want to thank the project because I am taking the huge portion of practical experience back to my country to share with museums workers, how to be helpful in this situation and how to be practically helpful with this huge number of refugees. And to be more like as following the presentation, we were discussing limits and paradoxes of agonistic approach in the time of war. For Poland, we have a long discussions and coming to this point that retelling of Polish, Ukrainian, Jewish stories was possible because of the current Russian threat, which mobilized all these efforts and possibilities for agonism. And also we see Armenian museums that they have some cosmopolitan and antagonistic narratives as we should refer to these theories and terms. But above all, the recent situation and the need to address this situation strengthens the narratives of care and responsibility for Artsakh heritage, creating Artsakh legitimacy within Armenian mnemonic landscape. And we see a new like prospect for museums to, as actors involved in help to refugees, which will be very new situation like for Armenian museums, because in last war it was some short-term experience. All of us knows that the people who were forcibly displaced, they will return. But now we have more than 90,000 people already arrived in Armenia from Artsakh, and they will not return back. So they will stay, and museums should further reflect on their role as space for dialogue and inclusion of refugees. And we see that this intergroup dialogue also as a space for agonism, let's say for refugees and host countries and hosting people. And yes, that mutual exchange of experience should bring eventually and challenging the hegemonic narratives, the general narratives, and make more diverse stories and more like human voices to be visible and hearable. Thank you.
Okay, so I want to start off briefly with some acknowledgements, because I wouldn't be sitting here today without actually the support of a lot of people. First and foremost, of course, my Armenian hero Harutian, who helped me to do lots of the bureaucracy surrounding accessing the archives. Aram at Yerevan State University, who did loads of visits with me to the Mother Armenia Monument and had lots of discussions with me about Armenian memory. Liana, who most of you probably know, who did the interviews with me and did the translations. Carolina, who's the undergraduate students who went with me to the archives and fluent in Armenian, Russian, and English, amazing. And last but not least, Osman, who went with me to the Army Museum in Lahore. So I'm going to start off with giving you a very, very brief background about the Mother Armenia Monument and the way it developed, its relationship to the Soviet exhibition, as well as the current Nagorno-Karabakh exhibition. And I hand over to Umber regarding the museum, the Army Museum in Lahore. And I will at the end then summarize it and look at agonism, or the potential of agonism, in military museums in conflict zones. So when we look at, can you actually see the slides? Because I can't really see you.
We can see the slides.
Okay, so
but you're going to need to tell us when to move them.
Okay, brilliant. So can you move now, please? So initially, it's very important to kind of remember that the Mother Armenia Monument was actually not built as a Mother Armenia Monument. It was built as a victory monument in 1945. So the communist government of Armenia made a decision to build it as when the Soviet army approached Germany. And the architect was Raphael Israyan, and the sculpturist was Sergei Merkurov. So right from the start, it was designed in such a way that Stalin was supposed to be 1.5 size of the actual size of Stalin, was supposed to be on top. There is this myth in Armenian memory today that the reason why the Stalin statue was built was to satisfy Moscow. This is not true. The documented archives has clearly shown that right from the start, the decision was made to build the Stalin statue on top. In 1962, the Stalin statue was removed. I did ask the question what actually happened to it. Nobody really knows. Apparently, one of the eyes of Stalin is still in private ownership, in actual fact, with the family who created the Mother Armenia later on. But what actually happened to the statue itself is unknown. It was replaced in 1960, so for quite a long time, it was empty, and it was replaced by Mother Armenia in 1967. In 1970, the opening of the Soviet exhibition, Armenia and the Great Patriotic War. And this is the exhibition you still see today, so it has very little changed. There are some changes at the beginning of the exhibition, but all in all, it hasn't changed. And in 1992, the entire monument was transferred to the Ministry of Defense. Can you change slides, please? I want to briefly talk about the architecture of the monument, because it is, most of you who've seen the Mother Armenia Monument probably haven't seen this section I'm showing you now, because it isn't accessible to the public anymore. But it's hugely important in the way Armenian memory functions in this space. because the entire monument was actually built using Christian symbolisms. So you can already see it at the entrance door, which features the 19 rosettes. And when you go inside and then you go up the stairs, which, as I said, most visitors today will not be able to do that, you are actually entering a dome. So inside, from the outside, it looks the monument looks like a pedestal, but inside it's very much like a church. Although I've been told numerous times it is not a church. But Raphael Israelian decided to create that dome inside to symbolize using the bells to call for the soldiers, because that's what they did in Yerevan at the time. So they were ringing the bells to call the soldiers for war. Can I change slides, please? So downstairs, again, this is also not visible to the soldiers, to the visitors today. You have something called the Hall of Fame, which is essentially designed to commemorate the Armenian soldier and the regiments who fought in the Red Army. You can see under a little bit, you might be able to see it. You see underneath the red the Soviet star, you can see the fountain. So again, it's the symbolism, the Christian symbolism, Armenian, and the fountain, the symbol of life. And on top, you've got a gap, which is actually a gap you can see if you go on the ground floor, if you are sitting or if you're standing on the top floor. And it is designed for you to come into the memorial, look down to the Hall of Fame, and basically because you have to look down, you're looking down to the soldier and you're bowing to the soldier who fought for Armenia. Change slides, please. So the entire exhibition is, as I said, was designed in 1917, has very little changed. I did ask the question in the interviews where the objects were coming from, who designed the exhibition, and there is absolutely no information. There's no information in the archives either. Apparently, most of the objects were donated by families, so none of them were bought. In terms of conservation, etc., there was very, very little recognition. So, for example, I did ask, what are the conservation issues in terms, especially exhibiting uniforms, etc. And I was told that there were no issues in terms of conservation. So clearly, there is very little thinking in the way the exhibition has been designed or how it's even maintained. The entire focus, and this is really important, the entire focus is based, change slides please, is based on the Armenian contribution to the Great Patriotic War. And in particular, the various generals, in particular Pamanyan and Babanjanyan, they were both really important figures and became already heroes during the Soviet era and even more so today. Change slides, please. And this brings me straight into the connection to the Great Patriotic War and the conflict between Nagorno-Karabakh. Because both generals, especially Pamanyan and Babanjanyan, were actually born in what is today the Karabakh region. And as such, they are seen as heroes because they already fought in various battles prior to the Great Patriotic War, and then, of course, in the Great Patriotic War. The difficulties with these characters is, for example, Babanjanyan, because what happens here is that, for example, his leading role in crushing the Hungarian uprising is completely blended out. So what we see in Armenia is something called mnemonic ambiguity. So it's this idea that the Soviet past is important if it's a usable past. So as long as the figures and the heroes fought for Armenia independence, then they are still exhibited today. And the other issue we are seeing is that most of the World War II veterans or their children, they actually got involved in the Nagorno-Karabakh war in 1992. So there's an emphasis on the fighting spirit. And what we're also seeing is increasingly a spillover of memory of the Russian memory of the Immortal Regiment. Some of you might know this. It's the parade which happens every year in Russia where you hold up your ancestors. We have a similar drive now in Armenia, and you can see it on the images thanks to Harutin. Can you change slides, please? Harutin emphasized to me that this is actually this is a fringe movement, but still it's important because it actually shows you Because what happens, you see the Artsakh flag, and this is directly linked, of course, to the Great Patriotic War, because that parade starts on the 9th of May. And the idea is that you're not only commemorating the soldiers who obviously fought during the Great Patriotic War, but you're also commemorating the fallen Karabakh soldiers. Change slides, please. And you can really see what Solan said about the mnemonic ambiguity in terms of how the 9th of May is interpreted. So the 9th of May is still commemorated as it's actually commemorated now as the victory of peace and liberation. And it is open to interpretation of what we are actually commemorating. Are we commemorating the Great Patriotic War, the end of the Second World War, or are we actually, for example, commemorating the liberation of Shushi? And you can see it, how ambiguous the entire memory is and how it fits into the overarching memory politics in Armenia. But you can also see how important still the Soviet legacy is, and it's still being used even today. Change slides, please. When we look at the Nagorno-Karabakh exhibition, that was established in 1992 or shortly afterwards. It has got some English sections now, and I'm quoting now directly from the actual exhibition because it's really important in order to understand how the text is. Because it starts off with the entire exhibition starts off with telling people what actually happened, as in during Perestroika, there was a wish for Artsakh integration. And unfortunately, Azerbaijan undertook everything for drowning Armenian movements in blood. So it is made. This is, as I said, directly quoted from the exhibition, and this is what every visitor reads at the beginning of the exhibition. So what you're seeing right from the start, it is made absolutely clear who the main enemy is, which is of course Azerbaijan. Move on, please. And the entire language continues like this. So, for example, you have here the narratives of the heroes never strive for fame, it comes to meet them instead. So there's a language of heroes and martyrs. And the consequence, of course, is that the pain, as in, for example, losing family members, is completely absent. In actual fact, I asked the current manager for the Mother Armenia Monument where they got the objects from, and he actually said they find it very, very difficult to get personal objects from the families because they simply don't want to hand over these objects. So you can see how the controversies, where the controversies are. Move on, please. And at one point, I actually asked the question, where is actually the pain? You know, where do we see the suffering, etc.? And the comment was, well, the pain has been...
we can't see the slide now is about the National Army Museum Lahore, so we don't have the slide that you're talking about.
Okay, I'm trying to share because I can't actually... can you see it now?
Yes, we can see it, yes.
So what you can see here is essentially Yerevan, which is in the outskirts of Yerevan. And what is really interesting, and this is the difference to the Mother Armenia Monument, the entire road leading up to Yerevan is actually lined with images of combat scenes. So you see, for example, soldiers like you can see it in the one images here, are being wounded and being dragged out or dragged away from combat scenes. And of course, the graves themselves are often decorated with lots and lots of personal items. So what we are seeing is a lot, the pain that is absent in the Mother Armenia Monument is actually definitely visible in Yerevan and the surrounding area. So in essence, the pain is pretty much an individual pain, but not a national pain. So I'm going to hand over now to Umbo, who will talk about the National Museum in Lahore.
Yeah, thanks, Doreen. I'll take this thing from now on. Okay. So, yeah, I'll try to bring something out around the National Army Museum, Lahore. It's It is my focus would remain more on the reimagining the idea of the idea of the state itself by the army and how it exhibits in the museum. So it would more be focused on the narrativization of around the army museum. So the National Army Museum, it's located in Lahore. You can see it there. It's like a big, it's on the big place, and it's really guarded very well by the security guards, and our friends from Poland must remember all those things. Uh, yeah, so it's really hard for some of the outsiders, I mean foreigners, to go there. But Joanna has found some ways to go in. So anyway, so uh, yeah, so something like it. Okay, okay. So it is in a big place. So many monuments one can find while going to the building. So many plates and the monuments describing about the martyrs and and the prayers about the martyrs and other slogans. And once you enter in the museum, you may find like Martyrs Gallery or Shohada Gallery, as it was called. And then there are many sections, like one is like celebrating the army chiefs who may happen to be, some of them were like even the dictators of Pakistan, but they were there as a celebrated chiefs. Um, and then we have like different sections, like describing about the leadership, the early leadership of gave birth to Pakistan, the founding fathers, and about different wars like 71, 65, 47, Kashmir related, and very interesting, the war against terrorism or the counter-terrorism activities, which is like, which I'll be in detail. I'll be telling something in detail later on. But yeah, one may find like many sections um, uh, in the museum. And something about these images would tell you something really strange and about what sort of narrativization is going on there around terrorism. But okay, so Army Museum is not the only museum situated in Lahore. I mean, the Lahore Army Museum is not the only army museum. We also have one in Rawalpindi, but that is not like open for public as such, or if it's open, most of the time what we find there is like uh, exhibitions of and displays of different armaments. So more focused on what army normally does, and what its function is, and that those things are normally exhibited, should be exhibited in the army museum, and that is one finds such things in Rawalpindi, one of those army museums. There, one may find like couple of other museums in different army cantonments, but they are completely under security. No one can go there. I mean, no public scholar at least. Um, what is most interesting thing that I find out here in the Army Museum is the reimagining of the whole story of Pakistan. So if we know about Pakistan, Pakistan came into being in 1947, we all know it. Uh, and it was around the concept of some sort of ideological conceptualization, meaning that Islam and Hinduism are two different distinct religious and civilizations, And because of that, the followers of both have the right to, international right to have their own separate political state. But there is another version of this, and that we find here exhibited throughout the museum. And that is that, and it is more kind of take us to the territorialized conception of understanding or narrativization of the country. So it is and as we travel, as we go in the museum, we find so many places telling something about the change in the narrative. So instead of ideology, the emphasis on ethnic groups like Muslims and Hindus. So, and something about like some very interesting thing that even the founding father had this position that the tolerance for the different communities is like the second spirit of Islam, which is quite unusual if we see from the ideological perspective. So, and but the more interesting thing are waiting there. History of Pakistan, which is which should be starting somewhere around 1947. One is amazed by different sections claiming that history of Pakistan started in 7,000 years back. So the whole Mahargarh, Mohenjo-daro and civilization of Harappa, which are kind of an archaeological sites in Pakistan, are claimed to be sites of Pakistan. And the attack, Assyrian attack and the Alexander's attack happened somewhere like in BCs, are also considered attack on Pakistan. So it's like, so 2 minutes, so what should I do now? No, okay. So, army. So when does history of Pakistan starts? Interestingly, I find out that it starts with the exhibition of martyrs, the Shohada Gallery as such. So whenever when we find the history of Pakistan, it starts when the first soldier gave the life for Pakistan. So it's like, and in this chart you can see that there is like wars. On one side there are wars, there's other peacetime, and there are different, like 4 wars totally waged in, especially with India, by Pakistan Army. And you can see the different, the deaths or the martyrs took place during those wars. So the first war, that was also one of the first disputed matter with India on the issue of Kashmir. It started right after the birth of Pakistan, like in 1947. So 47, 48, this war that ended somewhere in 49. You can see the number of martyrs there, and then the other war like 65, 71, 99. 99 is another interesting war. East Pakistan War is like with the on the issue of the birth of Bangladesh, and 65 is the major celebrated war, is the most elaborated section in the museum. And it is clearly linked with the disputed territory of Kashmir. 65 war wouldn't happen as it is exhibited there if Kashmir issue was not there. So yes, so now comes the main thing that what sort of, I'm going there. Okay, so. What sort of narrativization is there, and in the context of like our concepts, how we understand, we can understand it. Mostly it is antagonistic. Obviously, it's army museum. What can expect one can expect out of it. So largely it's antagonistic. India is the biggest enemy. Conspiracies and conspirators are the second biggest enemy. And with martyrs start the history of Pakistan. So it's like the heroes and the hero worships are always there. But then the cosmopolitan side is also there. To my surprise, I find out that a big section displaying the flags of international communities is right by the section of terrorism and the terrorism-related victims. This is really very surprising for me. And the reasons given were also surprising for the counterterrorism, that it was following the lines of what UN and US or the allied forces have already taken. It's like following those lines. Pakistan gone against the terrorist activities. So cosmopolitan, one can find the international alliance, the need for international alliance, and the UN resolutions, and some other thing. And one more thing is the women section that I missed it. I'm sorry, but women section is also a big section displayed here. So back to Doreen. So for the conclusions, if she is there.
Doreen, are you there? Can you hear us? You're being asked to conclude, and I'm going to ask you to do it in 2 words.
No?
Oh, we can't hear you, Doreen. This is
frustrating, sorry. So most of the literature on military museum is actually based on the European lens, in particular when we also look at antagonism, because it was based on World War II and World War I. We need to move away from this, and we need to look at how military museums actually are, what role there is in combat zones, because that's what we're dealing with. And finally, we have, of course, in the Western literature, there's often focus on the fact that actually we don't really see images of violence, and we don't really see images of combat. This is not the case in Pakistan, and actually they do show, they do have recreations of combat. They show you videos how people are being killed. So we really need to look at these museums from a different lens and not the European sense. 2 minutes.
well done. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Big round of applause. The floor is yours.
Yes, it's fine. Okay, great. So I will say the first half of our presentation, and then Tomek will continue. So our paper is on biographies, nations, and memory on the Polish-Lithuanian borderland. And what we wanted to explore in our paper is the complexities of Polish-Lithuanian memory, and we look at them through biographical narratives. So we focus on 4 important Polish-Lithuanian biographies, or biographies who are important in some ways to both countries. And we wanted to look at these biographies through how they are represented in museums, especially in house museums, and what happens to houses and flats left by people who are commemorated, and how are these narratives shaped and how they differ from Poland to Lithuania. And we thought that focusing on biographies might be an interesting way to look at the differences between these memory cultures. And the 4 cases we wanted to focus on are 4 biographies of people from different generations. Adam Mickiewicz, Antanas Baranauskas, Czurnionis, and Czesław Miłosz, who are all mostly writers. Čiurlionis was more also a painter, but they are all important for the understanding of the national identity in Poland and Lithuania, all four of them. And to start, I wanted to start with how Adam Mickiewicz is remembered. Adam Mickiewicz is an interesting person because he's Belarus born and of Lithuanian origin, but is considered the most important Polish poet for the Polish national identity. He's remembered in many countries, and he's commemorated in, as you can see on the slide, in both in Warsaw, Wrocław, Vilnius, Kaunas, Novogródek, Paris, and Istanbul. So we have many different commemorations which we can look at. And I wanted to give a few examples to show you how they differ, or how different curators approach his biography and the material remains that we have of Mickiewicz. And the first one which is the most important from the Polish perspective is the Adam Mickiewicz Museum of Literature in Warsaw. And it's an institution which is currently dealing with broadly understood literature. But actually, it was opened originally as the Adam Mickiewicz Museum. And it was originally supposed to focus on Adam Mickiewicz and his work, because his work was he should have a big museum in Warsaw. It was established in 1950 and started operating in 1952. And then in the late 50s and in the 60s, the museum shifted its focus to more broader topics of Polish literature, and started also accepting archives of important writers and items from different collections of writers. This is I don't have time here to talk about the whole history of the Museum of Literature, although it's very interesting, and the main reason why this focus shifted was because of the director Adam Mauersberger, who is a very important person in the institutional history of Polish literature. However, even though the museum now is interested in all types of literature, we might say, and is presenting exhibitions not only on Polish writers, but on European writers from different countries, the main permanent exhibition is about Adam Mickiewicz and about his life. And it was organized for in the 200th anniversary of the poet's birth. It contains many manuscripts of the poet's most important works and fragments of his letters, but also memorabilia, like things that belong to him, his furniture, many objects, and many also photographs and portraits of him. And a big part of this collection actually comes from the writer's daughter, who was called Maria Mickiewiczówna. Yes, and this exhibition is divided in 6 parts, and each one of them presents a different stage of his life. So this is like chronological perspective. Another interesting museum which we have in Poland is the Pan Tadeusz Museum, which is in Wrocław. And this is also interesting because we can say that this is a different borderland, because Wrocław before the Second World War was a German city called Breslau. So how did this eastern border person like Adam Mickiewicz end up in Wrocław? Well, the manuscript of Pan Tadeusz, which is arguably Mickiewicz's most important work, the manuscript was deposited originally in the Ossoliński National Institute in Lwów in 1939. And after the Second World War, the Ossoliński Institute was restored in Wrocław, which became a Polish city, and we had this big migration of people and the institutions from Lvov to Wrocław. And this institute was restored in Wrocław and took care of the former collection, which was evacuated from Lvov. And the manuscript was donated to the institute, which founded a separate museum for Pan Tadeusz, which operated as a branch of the institute. And the museum is located in the heart of the city of Wrocław, and was opened in the tenement house on Rynek 6, which was donated by the city and is dedicated to this purpose. The narrative of the main exhibition of the museum is dedicated to the epic and brings the visitor to 7 spaces. And the main spaces are dedicated to the poet and his work. We have an interactive space which presents the biography of Adam Mickiewicz, showing the timeline of his life as a journey on the wall map, based on a copy of a map of Europe dated back to 1853. And we also have the central part of the exhibition, which is devoted to the manuscript itself. We have a small fragment of the book presented on one wall and an interactive photocopy of the whole manuscript on the other side. However, also as with the Warsaw Museum, we can say that the museum expanded its focus. So we have not only, now it's not only devoted to Pan Tadeusz and to Adam Mickiewicz, but also the permanent exhibition. We have their permanent exhibitions which are devoted to other prominent figures of the 20th century Polish culture and literature, such as Władysław Bartoszewski, Jan Nowak-Jeziorański, and Tadeusz Różewicz. And I see that I don't have much time, so I will try not to dwell so much into every topic. We also have Adam Mickiewicz museums in Vilnius and Kaunas. So in Vilnius, we have a museum which is located in the building in which Mickiewicz wrote some of his most important works, ballads and romances, and Grażyna. We have this sign which you can see on the slide that he lived here. There's also another slide saying that this is where he wrote Grażyna, which is also considered very important. And the museum is split into 3 small exhibitions in the different parts of the building. One is about the Lithuanian aspect of the life of the poet. The second one is about the Filmeth Society, which was a students' organization that existed at the Imperial University of Vilnius. And the third one is a very strange exhibition in a cellar, and it's focused on the women in the life of Adam Mickiewicz, and we mostly have just portraits of different women which were important for Mickiewicz. And there's another interesting memory site, which is also in Vilnius, which is called the Konrad's cell. Dziady, which is also perhaps the most important work of Adam Mickiewicz, is the most important part of this book takes place in this place, which is called Konrad's cell, and we have this recreation of this cell in the center of Vilnius, in the old town, and it's a very small memory site. It's only 25 square meters, and of them is this scenography, this recreation of the cell, and the second part contains an exhibition on the life and work of the poet and the trial of the Filmeth Society. And the last thing I wanted to mention about Adam Mickiewicz is the Perkunas house, which is another interesting memory site, which is grandly named the Adam Mickiewicz Museum, although it only contains a small exhibition of objects which were there are no original artifacts linked to the poet, but there are some books he wrote and different translations. So maybe here I can give the floor to Tomek, because I think I already said most of the spent most of our time. So Tomek, if you want to continue.
Yes, thank you. Do you hear me? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So I will continue. Of course. How much time do I have?
You have 9 minutes.
9 minutes. So yes, talking about three other personalities after Mickiewicz might be a bit challenging, but I will try to be as concise as I can. So the other biography we chosen was Antanas Baranauskas, Antoni Baranowski, the person who for the Polish audience doesn't sound very familiar for those who are, let's say, not interested in the history of Polish-Lithuanian borderlands and Lithuanian culture. But Baranauskas was a Catholic priest, mathematician, and a poet, and he became a classic of Lithuanian literature because he wanted to show the world that the Lithuanian language, that you can write as good in Lithuanian language, poetry, as Adam Mickiewicz did so in Polish. So Baranauskas became a classic of Lithuanian literature, but as a priest and as a Catholic bishop, he was appointed to the as a bishop of Seine diocese, so the region we are now. And during his service here, he was trying to hear Lithuanian voice as well, because of course the Catholic Church was dominated by Poles. But on the other hand, he didn't support it to the very last movement, the Lithuanian movement. So the Lithuanians had seen him a bit as a traitor. So we have a situation that a person who becomes a classic of Lithuanian literature then became a bit far away from Lithuanian from Lithuanian movement as a politician. But after 1990, when the new history of the borderland is being written after the times of communism, after the time of the Iron Curtain, and after the time that people from borderland are starting to see each other, the personality of Baranowski as a symbol became again a point of Polish-Lithuanian quarrels and, let's say, memory wars, because there were the Lithuanians who wanted to erect a monument of Baranauskas in Seine, and they did so. So the Polish were started to push some anti-Lithuanian narratives in the region, but that was. But here on the Polish side, we don't have any other sides that are connected to Baranauskas. We have one plaque near the Seine Cathedral. We have the monument, but we don't have a museum of Baranauskas or Baranowski. The only biographical museum we found on the Lithuanian side in the town or city of Anykščiai, and actually it was the first biographical museum established in Lithuania in 1927 as a work of the relative of Baranauskas, Antanas Vienuolis, who was also a writer. He was connected with Bishop Baranauskas through his mother, and he started to foster the memory about Baranauskas, and of course the collection of locality, the forest of Anykščiai, the masterpiece of Baranauskas is inspired by work of Adam Mickiewicz. And Anykščiai is a real place, a town where the biographical museum of Baranauskas is located. And the centerpiece of the establishment is a granary built back in the beginning of 19th century, where Baranauskas actually wrote his most important poems. And the museum, it's the hut where the poet used to stay during the summers, and Vienuolis collected various objects related to various stages of Polish life, like the furniture from the house where Baranauskas used to live in Kaunas at the end of 19th century. So everything looks like really paradoxical. We have a country cottage filled with elegant furniture taken from the city, upholstered in black leather. But on the other hand, almost all of those objects that we found in this museum are originals and somehow related to the Baranauskas. And the granary is enclosed by a larger building which protects the cottage from destructive effects of the environment. So you see that we have the cottage, and everything is under the roof or under a separate building in the under the roof. So maybe let's go to Čiurlionis. Čiurlionis was a painter and composer, a writer who became a classic of Lithuanian art. This time, art, not literature, and profoundly influencing modern Lithuanian culture. However, all his writings were written in Polish language. Here the Polish connection is basically the fact that he studied in Warsaw at the Warsaw Institute of Music, and after studying music, he went to Germany for a scholarship, then went back to Warsaw and joined Warsaw Drawing School. After 1907, where the legal Lithuanian art, literary and political movement starts in Vilnius, he's moving to Vilnius. He married Lithuanian girl who taught him Lithuanian, and after that he became a really important person in Lithuanian movement, and nowadays he's regarded as a classic of Lithuanian art. The main gallery in Lithuania has the name of Čiurlionis. Main school of art is named after Čiurlionis. And let's say all the biographical collection and all of his works are in the Museum of Čiurlionis in Kaunas. However, we have some places that are biographically connected to him. in Vilnius. He lived in on Savicho Street, and in 1995, an institution called Čiurlionis House was opened at the address, but the exhibition doesn't recreate the artist's home. Instead, you will find some exhibition halls and space for concerts and thematic events. There is a biographical museum in Druskininkai, or Druskininkai, in Lithuanian, that are the houses of the manor that his parents bought back in 1896, because his father was organist in a local church, and the museum was opened back in 1963, and everything was restored after the narrative. Okay. After the narrative of the relatives of Čiurlionis, basically his sisters. So let's maybe, and there are some fresh attempts to memorize Čiurlionis in Poland, because he died actually in Marki near Warsaw, 1911, but still it's under the process. So here we can. We can say some. We can talk about the memory activism on the Polish side. Maybe the conclusions. So we skipped Miłosz. We are with Miłosz all the time. So if you want to know anything about Miłosz, I can share the. The conclusions of our paper. Can we find agnostic memory in these museums? There are no Lithuanian perspective in Polish institutions, and vice versa. The Lithuanians remember Poles more than Poles the Lithuanians, and the Polish memory culture dominates. The third one, various actors are engaged in the commemoration of biographies: ministries, local governments, memory activists. These museums rely on an aura of authenticity, but in many cases the authentic objects are missing. There is a need for commemoration events without material. That's the question. These museums have great potential for Polish-Lithuanian educational projects, for example, for schools. So,
thank you. Great. Yeah, really interesting conclusions there. Okay, can I ask the speakers in the room to come up to the front so we can, I know we're getting very close to coffee breaks, Veronica will be, but can we have 10, 15 minutes for some questions? Is that okay? Yeah. Joanna, you can just answer yes or no to questions. So, Umber, where you go? I can sit here. Do you want to go there? Is it possible to have our 3 speakers online up like that? Or yeah, they are. Okay, great. So a real range of different museum approaches here, from another borderland experience to biography, conflict, what to do in museums when you are in a society at conflict. So yeah, real eclecticism here, I would say. Any questions from the floor?
Hi, so I have a question for the Lahore Army Museum, or Military Museum, for that team. After presenting, sort of walking us through the museum, which clearly depicts very one-sided story, the conclusion was kind of that maybe the Military Museum should have more agonistic approach. And so the question is, not that one only, but in general. I was just curious, have you found any examples of military museums from other countries that attempt maybe to present kind of a different layered stories and histories. Just kind of curious. And then for the last presenters, so this Polish-Lithuanian dance on different levels, whether it's through literature, art, actual border lands, as we saw yesterday. I guess I'm curious, are there actual examples of agonistic pathways between the two places? Because we see all these examples, but they're, like even the textbooks yesterday, the example, we kind of know that this is what it is, that it's more antagonistic than agonistic. But I'm curious, like anybody, maybe it's not just current presenters, but like anybody in a group, like what are the good examples that exist, and do they exist, or we're just kind of at the beginnings of some attempt for this agonistic approach between these two countries?
Thank you. My question goes to Doreen. One question to Doreen and the other one to Umber. So Doreen, I'm interested, how do you think, to what extent do the ways of remembering and commemorating the first Nagorno-Karabakh war to what extent they build on the earlier patterns of Soviet memory, like memory politics of the Soviet times, and to what extent they actually try to find some distinct new ways of doing these commemorations. And my question to Umber is about the funding of this exhibition. Do you know who were the funding institutions with this exhibition in National Army Museum in Lahore, which we visited actually, and how do you think, to what extent the configurations of funding institutions influences the final shape of this exhibition? Thank you.
I have a question which relates both to the first presentation and then about Lahore Museum. When we talk of agonism, I think there are two ways of looking at it. One is against the other, the perceived or actual enemy or the occupier, like Iron Curtain and Azerbaijan or communism. And also in India, India is the enemy. And the other aspect is, so we have to see whether the other is the antagonistic or perceived enemy or the occupier is also, that point of view is also, or should be reflected in the way the museum is curated, and that point of view, Azerbaijani point of view or Soviet point of view or Indian point of view, should be given some space. The second is that within the community, like the Armenian or Pakistanis, there are different narratives. Like in Pakistan's case, the museum actually represents one view of Pakistanis, like the army chief Ziaul Haq or General Musharraf. They were the dictators who committed a lot of blunders and really were perceived as the enemy. And there they are presented as the heroes because at that time they were army chiefs. So army chief, today, the present day army chief, General Asim Munir, he has not yet, yet taken over as a dictator, but as an army chief, he is still calling the shots. So within the museum, like the Army Museum, this is one narrative which is being presented, which is disputed within Pakistan. Like many Pakistanis think that the fundamentalists or so-called enemy within or conspirators, this is such a vague term. Some people think they are the true inheritors of the founders of Pakistan. Others think that Pakistan was actually imposed on them, like in Balochistan, the democratic process was not adopted. So when we are curating or conceiving a museum, I think either we go with the one-sided narrative, the army, present-day army interpretation of what Pakistan is all about, or we just leave the army-ness of the museum and go for the national museums, which are more like reflective of the history and more durable, because the army museum narrative keeps on changing, and we could have never thought of in an army museum this ideological approach being taken about the army, enemy within, or which is an ideological approach. So I think this matter is still has to be defined, how the otherness is defined, otherness within the community, otherness outside the community. Otherwise, it will become another one-sided narrative. So any comments?
Am I allowed to comment?
Can we take those questions, please? Because I think,
Okay.
yeah. So Umbe, can we take them in the order that they came?
Doreen wants to say a few things first, but then I'll go with the rest of the questions. If Doreen.
Okay, can I just quickly say to the Lahore Museum, of course, it is very one-sided, the exhibition in the museum. And of course, the enemy, as in terms of India, is absolutely clear. But the challenge you have is that the museum, and the Army Museum, is situated within a certain political context in Pakistan. And when you go to the museum, you also see, for instance, school groups going there, scout groups, etc. So we cannot ignore this museum and just say, oh, well, let's move on and let's look at the national museums, because ultimately this is a narrative, especially two nations theory. This is a narrative which is promoted in textbooks in Pakistan, it's promoted in these museums, and actually is also promoted in the national museums. So we need to be very critical about it. And I don't think the way Pakistan is right now in the political context of Pakistan, I don't think there's an opportunity to actually revamp the exhibition in such a way that it becomes reflective. So in an ideal world, it should be an exhibition that looks at the different conflicts and the way it impacted on Pakistan, but also Pakistan, India, and as well as Bangladesh. But right now, this is just not the case. The enemy is India. In terms of, there was another question about whether there are any military museums that actually do take an agonistic approach. There are quite a lot of them, especially if you're looking, for example, at World War I in France, if you're looking, for example, at World War II in particular, also in Germany. In fact, the military museums are very much in Germany, very much taking an agonistic approach. But it's the problem, and this is what I tried to say in my conclusion, those conflicts commemorating in those museums, World War I, World War II, are past conflicts. And because of that, it's probably a bit easier to actually take that agonistic approach. Whereas in this case of Pakistan and as well as Armenia, we are in the midst of a conflict. And in the case of Pakistan, we are even on a very shaky grounds when it comes to democracy. So it's very difficult to implement an agonistic approach.
Okay, so, or is it enough? Are you?
I'm not taking any more questions. We've got enough to deal with here. So yeah. Okay, but I don't think we have time for further questions. We can continue that over coffee. So maybe the question to Tomasz about the textbooks, the museums.
We are not in the museum at the moment, but this is institution which was always as well in the scope of our research is a perfect example that that it exists on Polish-Lithuanian borderland as well, because you cannot find another institution here that is giving so much voice to the Lithuanian, and it starts from the walls of the room we are we are here with the translation of Miloš poetry into Lithuanian, and all the actions that are taken here. And I would say that actually the installation in the other room on Polish-Lithuanian borderland and in both languages, it's something unique. Of course, there are some other initiatives now on the other side of the border. But as an institution, I would say that the International Center of Dialogue and exhibitions being here would be the main, if not the only, example of. Okay. Sarah, you want to add something?
No, I don't think I have anything to add. I agree with Tomek.
Please, thank you. I think there was a question from Tomasz for Doreen about the Mother Armenia monument.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot about this one. It's a very interesting question. I would actually say that the blueprint and the way the Soviet exhibition has been developed, the whole focus on the heroization, the Soviet hero, etc., is actually the blueprint for the Nagorno-Karabakh exhibition. There is very, very little deviation from it, I would argue. And I would also say that I don't think there is much thought in Armenia on how to design exhibitions, because when I, for example, said to the current director of the Mother Armenia Monument, when I asked him and said, so what is the thinking behind the exhibition, he said to me, well, first and foremost, it's about showing that we have a history, and that so no other nation can claim that we don't. So the idea is to create an exhibition, and this is especially for the Nagorno-Karabakh exhibition, the idea, and Soviet exhibition. The idea is to show that we have a fighting spirit, and we need to present this fighting spirit in order to survive, considering the enemy, which is of course in Azerbaijan, also in Turkey. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you, Doreen. Look, I suggest...
About the funding question.
Ah, yes, the funding question. Yes.
Yeah. So, Tomasz, it was completely funded by the ISPR. Our brigadier ranked officer, kind of a director of the Army Museum, and it's in the total, complete supervision of Army. So there's no point that there's some other group come there and exhibit its own thing. So it's like a story coming from the main army, core army sectors.
Thank you. I suggest we continue any other discussions and any missed questions there over coffee. Can we thank our panel again and our online participants?